Welcome back. Well, at least I hope it's a welcome back. I hope you've taken in some of the previous 28 episodes. I really can't believe that it's been this long, but it's been a wonderful discipline for me. And for a few of you, it's been a discipline as well, but I doubt that there's anybody who's taken it all in. And I expect that since you're watching this on YouTube or in some other form that you're also doing six other things at once. I get that. See how that's distracted us from keeping the main things the main things. Seems to me that in church life, over the last couple of generations, we've fallen away from what we call a premise that we believed it was based on the Bible, but I've seen so much in church life that has no resemblance to what the Bible says. That's not so bad, but that also is contrary to what is taught in the Bible and in the way in which we treat things. For example, I had to do a lot of pastors' conferences in my life. And I've never been to a pastors' conference where somebody who is seen to be the middle of the pack is the speaker at that conference, or certainly not the people at the bottom of the pack. How do we describe the pack? We don't describe them by their character. We don't describe them by even their accomplishments in the past. We describe them by the size of their ministry. And that is a false way to evaluate what's right. There's this fallacy that people believe that the pastors, for example, of the larger churches are the best people, best character, best gifts, best everything else. Not necessarily true. A lot of great saints of the past have served in out-of-the-way places by choice and have had limited global impact that people don't even know their names, but will know in eternity what the effect of their service was seeking to follow Jesus. Well, if you've been following, you know we're in the training of the 12. I lost my paper clip. I got to get another one. We're this far through the book. If this one was yours, you can see, I think, that was, it's been used before by somebody else. I bought it used many years ago. And honestly, I bought it used. I thought I'll get around to it someday. And I did finally get around to it. When I got around to it, I found it, my brain would stop in kind of mid-sentence, and I'd have to go back and reread to get the thought process straight. And that's why I've decided to take it and redo it. It's out of copyright because of 70 years after the author Jackson wrote this in 1870, so I guess he's still not alive. No, he's not. And that means that we can legitimately copy the thing. I'm not could publish it as is, but I don't want to do that. Two reasons. It's too long in today's standards, but also when you read it, you have to put extra concentration. It's like you're on a street where there's a lot of stoplights and you're having a hard time getting through. I want you not on a superhighway where you can go too fast, but on a road where you can keep a steady pace going through the book. Now, as I read through the book, I realized, a second time, I realized that there are many things that really could be applied better in our world or understood better. And quite honestly, while I'm basing this chapter, as all chapters, on what Bruce said, I've rewritten, I've studied too strong of a word, but I've cogitated on it. How about I put it that way? And I think that he missed some things or misstated some things, and I could well be wrong on that. And I want to, in due course, I want to put this in your hand so that you can compare these videos, and you might even turn these videos into a set of articles that depends not so much on the demand, but the value that I think would be there if in fact people did so. Well, today we're going to deal with a difficult subject. Let me mention again before we get to that, the breakthrough pathways concept is to get people from where they are to where God wants them to be, starting with young people preferably, but people who are getting a fresh start, maybe later in the day in their life, but maybe a second career, a bunch of people. I'm a great believer in the fact that all the people who retire at age 55 need to do something productive with their life, and why not be that be a ministry? I mean, they can start a business. They can go buy a house and start an Airbnb kind of a facility. Not a bad idea. And starting a business, not a bad idea. But so much is needed in the life of the church, particularly in churches today that are smaller than they were 20 years ago when you signed up for that great retirement plan. And you can, in your retirement years, when you've got perhaps 2/3 of your income that you once had, go to a church that might not be able to even afford 1/3 of the salary that you once had, but you will have a tremendous ministry working with others. Whether you're a medical doctor, a teacher, maybe in some other career where you had influence in your local church and you love the Lord and you want to serve the Lord. And, I don't know, maybe you're a librarian. But you have the opportunity to move on and do something great with your life in helping, perhaps in an out-of-the-way place, some people who really could use your help for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. You might find that to be the most rich time of your life. I believe you will. I talked to others who have done it and have said so, saying, why didn't I do this earlier? One of the men that I think is definitely mentioned served as an associate pastor in the church. Never technically went to Bible school, but he retired at his regular retirement age, and he said to me, I wish I'd retired so many years earlier because the aggravations I had in the church are doing something for eternity. The aggravations I had in my previous career were just aggravations. Well, at that, I just stick that out there. And maybe if you're a pastor or somebody, you can encourage somebody else and say, you know what? I think you'd make a really good interim pastor or even a full-time pastor in a church. And I think you ought to think about that and perhaps do some testing of your personality to see if you're suited for that, because it may not have been part of your self-image. Well, I will go on that subject for a long time, because there's such a tremendous need today for people to take primary leadership in local churches. Well, today we're looking at something Jesus said about the first and the last. And we understand it in theory, but I'm not, many people do, but I'm not convinced that people really grasp what Jesus was saying. Now, what Bruce does is he brings to bear some other stories from the scripture other than where this statement is made in two of the Gospels, in Matthew 19:30 and Mark 10:31, but where it is really useful for us to understand what's required of us by the Master. If we're looking for a reward, we're in trouble. And Jesus fundamentally was saying, looking for rewards demonstrates wrong motives, and many who think they can become first and be well appreciated by others end up being last, because the quality of their work matters much more than the quantity, even though the quantity matters. Okay, so that's just a broad strokes where we're going here. Okay, turn it off, go do something else. No, really, stay with this, because Bruce has helped us. He brings to bear 3 parables of Jesus that help us understand how this works, that the first become last and the last become first. There's 3 parables, and they're all about work. And there's the parable of the pounds, and it's a hypothetical story. It's not real, but where this owner says, I'm going away. I'm going to give you 10 minus, which is equal to 3 months' salary, maybe 10, 12,000 bucks. If you think $1,000 a minor, then that's kind of put it in a framework that you understand. There's 3 cases. He gives 10 minus to one person who goes off and demonstrates initiative, very important characteristic, and puts that money to work, and comes back and says, hey, you put 10 in my hands, and you made another 10. And the reward that is supplied here is rulership over 10 cities. huge territorial advantage. Second case, the guy gets 10, same amount, 10 minus, puts in a half an effort, goes and makes 5 more, comes back with 15, and the master says, well, I'll put you over 5 cities, but he doesn't say well done. And then in the third case, the guy says, okay, you gave me 10, I got 1 left. Here's what's left back to you. And he's called a wicked servant because he didn't take the resources that were put in his hands and use them for the master. And of course, the parallel here is talking about the Lord's work. Okay, so same assignment of wealth, but very different response. Now, the second parable is the parable of the talents. It's very different. It's similar but different. In this case, the talent is worth more like $1 million. It's not like $1,000. It's like it's $1 million. It's a huge amount of money. In case number 1, the guy, according to his ability, is given 5 talents, I think $5 million. And he goes out and makes another $5 million bucks. That working for you. And he did a tremendous job, and he's going to be given authority over much. Doesn't describe the much in this case, but he gets this response from the master that says, well done. Now the second guy is given 2 talents. Talent, it's money. It's not talents in our definition of talents. He's given 2 talents. And he goes out in the same time frame, and he also doubles his money, even though it's much less. The first guy comes back and gives him 10. He gives him 10, and he comes back and gives him 4. But he gets exactly the same response from the master. He's going to be given authority over much in the kingdom of God. And that's an illustration, not over much in the earthly world, but it's an illustration that there will be, excuse me, there will be a difference in the final unveiling of things in the kingdom. There will be, I don't know whether hierarchy is the right term, but some people will be in charge of much and some people will be in charge of less. But in the case of these 2 guys, the equalizer was they did the best they could do and they get the same reward, even though from our evaluation in earthly terms, it doesn't look the same. Okay, so let me come back to what I mentioned earlier. If the pastor pastors a church of 1,000, and he does well with it, and some do, and it grows, and perhaps it doubles, and it goes to 2,000, then that guy's the superhero. Everybody wants him on their platform, and everybody knows what his name is. He's the guy who gets the interviews on the podcast and everything else. And then there's the guy who has a church of 200. And his church goes to 400, and maybe a few people in his denomination notice. But he just doesn't get famous. He may be out there, everybody can do what I'm doing right now. The idea is a laptop or a phone. And he's out there, but nobody's watching online because he's not famous. But he isn't God's eyes, according to the parallel that this parable creates. So we have to rethink our evaluation. Now, the guy who did poorly was the guy who was given the same opportunity with 1 talent. Maybe, the master would get. This guy's probably going to lose it. So, but he gives him a chance. And the guy buries it in the ground. And when his master comes back, he says, oh, I knew you were hard. No, don't beat me up, don't me up. And he's got wicked and slothful servants. He gave the master back what he was given in the first place, but he didn't double it. And that parable is very different than the previous parable, but there's underlying principles that we need to see in both of these. Now, there's a parable about the laborers at the vineyard, and this one is hard, it's impossible to understand from a human perspective. Starts off with day workers who work in the vineyard for a day's work, they pay for the day. We're going to say that's $300. It's very different than the others. The guy starts at 6 a.m., works to 6 p.m., and he gets paid a dinner. Guy gets it back in the morning because the master goes back to the employment agency and finds the day work is still available and doesn't know what he's going to get paid, but he's going to get paid fairly. The day goes back at 12 an hour and finds some more people, and he hires them. He goes back at 3 o'clock and hires them, but he goes back at 5 o'clock and hires a few people. It's really worth it when the day is done. Now, if they don't know at the beginning what they're going to get paid, that's a very important principle. But they're trusting the vineyard owner, and the first guy who starts early in the morning has agreed to work for the whole day for a denarius. He says, I'm good with that. And at the end of the day, the vineyard owner starts with a guy who started in the last hour, and he pays him a denarius, and all the way back, everybody gets a denarius. And they started to whine and complain, the guys who got there earlier. We took on the trouble of the heat of the day. That's not fair. No, sorry, folks. It's up to the owner to pay what he wants to pay. And if he wanted to be generous, it's up to him. And you got nothing to complain about because the deal that you took was the deal that you kept. So, in the parable of the pounds, these guys are given 10 equal abilities, we can think. Everyone started with the same resources, and they got different results from the same resources, but the rewards matched their actual performance. And there was no praise at all for partial effort. In sports, there's an analogy that says you got to lay it all on the court, on the field, and you put it out. You give it everything you've got, and you might win, and you might lose, and you might have a good game, and you might have a bad game, but you put it all on the court. Now, there's been in professional sports, because of the betting that goes on in sports, and you can bet almost anything, there's been evidence that some athletes, beyond some that were famous from the past, have actually kind of gamed the system and kind of, you know the term, they lollygagged out there. And they looked like they were working, but they weren't putting out 100%. And they're the ones that don't get any praise for limited effort. How's that fun? Well, we see a lot of people who say, well, the guy's got to have time for playing his games. The guy's got to have time for watching his Netflix series. Have you seen this new series that's just come out? It's really good, and I got to see that. Besides, I got to have time with my wife and my family. I've got to work on that classic car that I'm rebuilding, and we need the respite of going to the summer place, the cottage, the places they call it a camp. And it's because everybody else has that. And so, folks, putting it all on the floor or on the field means that you set those things aside and serve the Lord, not with a portion of your time, but with all of your time allocated, some of it to legitimate work, making money and taking care of your family, some to volunteer work, some to spending time with your neighbors just because, eating burgers, but some of it to serve the Lord officially, maybe volunteering in a local care center of some sort, a food bank or something like that. All of your time belongs to Him. And He knows that you need rest. He said to His disciples, come, let's go rest a while. He understood the need for rest and recovery because He was even the sinless Son of God wore out and needed rest. So He understands the need. But when you put too much into it and get it out of balance, then you're in trouble. In this case of the pounds, they were all given equal ability, but someone squandered it. In the case of the talents, they were given different abilities. The ratios stayed the same. The 5 guy had the ratio, and he got 5 more. The 2 guy got 2 more. The 1 guy got 0 and got chastised for that. Punished, I suppose. but they got proportional results to who they were and where they were. And I would say in the stage of life, you can have a lot more available in some stages of life. If your household is full of little children and you've got the chaos that means at that phase of life, you have a responsibility to make sure that part of your life stays in balance. That's part of the stewardship. And you can't just run off and try and evangelize the world and ignore your own family. It's not that the family comes first, it's that the family comes in balance. Now, the workers' attitudes where each got a denarius for the amount of time that they work. The early workers made the strict bargain. I'll work for you for a denarius. The late workers probably didn't expect to get the extra money from the vineyard owner, but he paid them way above the amount of labor. The attitude determined the final payment amount, apparently. And the humility that is demonstrated by some in the service of Jesus is all that really matters. You see, the first type, apparently, Bruce says this, I think he's stretching it a little far. They had a calculating and proud attitude, where the second type, who started later in the day, they had a humble and trusting attitude. I think they more got lucky. But there's another passage in another situation where the worker comes in and the owner doesn't say, sit down, enjoy this meal with me. No, he expects that he'll also, after working the fields all day, prepare a meal, because he takes the attitude that says, we're unworthy servants. We've only done our duty. And that's something to always bear in mind. You are always just available to do your duty if you're serving Jesus. The late workers, they got a bonus. Absolutely. And perhaps it was their humble heart that gave them the bonus. I think that's a stretch, that they got a bonus just because it was the generosity of the owner in the story. But we have in the Bible the story of the lost son from Luke 15. And you know that story well, we call him the prodigal son. The guy went out and wasted the inheritance. The older brother said, that's not fair. Well, no, it wasn't fair. But it's the way things work. Why does pride and I need to be balanced and get my fair share? I've been ripped off. I've been treated unfairly. Where does it come from? Well, sometimes people have flash in the pan. There's 15 minutes of fame, and they do something that's heroic, and they build their whole self-image around that and say that since I did that and the results last, that I should continually get praise and accolades for that. The things that are popular to service when you're in front of people, they tend to get more praise, and sometimes people start believing the press releases that others write for them. And even when some say, oh, look what all I've done, what I've sacrificed for you, they think that deserves extra praise. No, they just gave it all they had. And many people have fallen in the past and continue to this day to fall into those traps. There have been faithful exceptions, and they still exist today. Lots of missionaries and pastors and even unpaid workers have remained selfless servants for the Lord. There are modern reformers who will leave behind them a legacy that people won't even know that they started something good. True servants never demand rewards. It's always a matter of trusting the system, if you would. See, many who are first in the assessment of our world, the evaluation of their life by common standards fails. I know that. I've spoken in churches large and small, on rare occasions to thousands of people, but I know that the people who listen value what I say based on the size of the crowd. And at those pastors' conferences that I say I've been to, people, I've seen it happen that people go up and talk to the speaker and they say, oh, that was wonderful. And I wasn't so sure. I never heard a speaker at a pastor's conference or where it was a total loss. I've had some close calls, but never a total loss. Always gained something of value from what somebody has said. But just because the guy's famous doesn't make what he's saying more authoritative. It's more authoritative if it's based on a humble attitude expressing what's true from the Word of God. Uh, don't think that apparent worth is the real worth. It may or may not be. Don't assume you know what's of value. That assuming what you know is of value always fails. That includes evaluating your own work. I never did one of these broadcasts that I thought I did as good as I could do. I preached a sermon that I thought I did as good as I could do, but I gave it all that I put it. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm giving you the best that I've got for today. I've had people say, well, you should re-record that and make it more professional. Hey, folks, I'm not going to do that because if I did that, I'd get one video in a lifetime because I'd always be wanting to redo and do 60 takes and do it better and so on. Authenticity counts for an awful lot more than professionalism. I hope I'm not so unprofessional that it grates your teeth, but I'm not going to redo it. This is the best I've got for you today, and I think that is what really matters, and it's the real worth that's only evaluated by the master that counts. So, the first will be last, because we evaluate wrong. The last will be first. Some that people evaluate didn't even know they get to, in the final judgment, to be those at the top of the heap. But sometimes the last just flat out stay last. They don't do what they ought to do, and they just are out there in this grand mush of mediocrity and just getting by, maybe getting underpaid, maybe saying, woe is me, maybe getting overpaid and saying, this is a cushy job. Some pastors are overpaid and they have people around them who cover for them, and they don't even know that they're overpaid. And those who are last, sometimes just stay last. God's kingdom is always built on ultimately rewarding those who are faithful. So you got to have the balance in life, and you don't try to figure it out. The master's in charge. He will do what is fair, what is right, and don't be confused or bitter because it doesn't seem right to you. It isn't over until it's over, and you can stay with being faithful, which is what's required of you. So what? Well, hard work matters. It counts for something. The intensity with which you work really, really matters. The attitude you take towards how you serve the Lord really, really matters. Your expectations matter, and don't over-expect for the thing. I think a lot of people go into ministry expecting that people are going to pat them on the back more than they do. No, you're going to get kicked in the butt as often as you get patted on the back, or more so. Get over it. Set a fair rate of expectations. People expect far more of you sometimes than you can deliver. Just do the best you can do is all you can do. Doing your duty, showing up matters. I don't know who said it, maybe, but 90% of success is just showing up on time, every time, doing what you said you would do when you said you were going to do it. People say, well, if I were in charge, then I would do A, B, and C. No, they put them in charge and they don't do A, B, and C. They even sometimes do worse than the previous guy they thought they would have stripped. These things matter. Consistency matters. You get better if you stay consistent at it, by all evidence, but you won't ever get as great as you wish it could be. It matters if you keep showing up, and faithfulness matters. It's required in stewards, said Paul, that a person becomes faithful. So recognition doesn't matter. No, it does not. Doesn't matter whether you have a good housekeeping seal of approval slapped on your forehead. If you do the best you can do, that's fine. If you get the authorization, you get ordained or licensed in some way, or you get a degree after your name, well, that's not all bad, but that's not what counts. The recognitions don't matter in the end of the day. The status that you achieve. You know, pastors always, often, and professors as well, they kind of evaluate themselves by checking the brass nameplate on their door when they go and hide in their office. And they say, no, I'm still the pastor here, but brass nameplate's on the door. Everybody else should respect me. Get over it, people. Your perception doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. You're not the judge. The perception of other people saying you're failing doesn't matter. Well, it matters to a degree because sometimes their evaluation of you is better than your evaluation of you. And you need to look at what might be your narcissistic tendencies or the fact that you evaluate yourself as doing better than you are doing. You need to take honest feedback. But if you give it the best you got and you've taken all the feedback you can and they still want to kick you out the door, it doesn't matter. Most pastors, most of my church, many pastors get fired from churches at least twice in their lifetime. Because the next guy will be just as bad and they'll fire him too. So if they fire the last guy, just wait 3 years, they're going to fire you too because somehow the structures in the church want you to be their slave and their servant in a way that Jesus doesn't. Now, the whole image of leadership from a biblical perspective is that you start out as the servant of all. You are the slave, even though you are kind of the overseer of all the other people. A really good short book that you should read on that is one by my friend Brian Taylor, who published recently, Navigating Leadership in Faith Communities. It's an intensely biblical book that will help kind of reformat your brain in terms of how you start out understanding what to do to lead you. You should obey me because I'm the best man do. Folks, you gotta get your head on straight. And I think it needs adjusting every day. You know, like you adjust your tie. You look in the mirror and adjust your head. Because your problem is not out there. The problem that you can attend to, the only problem you can attend to is what happens in here. That's what matters. If you don't get your head on straight, you're going to rot. And you try to figure it out. And why aren't you getting the recognition that you should be getting, or something like that? You become bitter. You will discourage other people because they'll say, "Oh, he thinks he's a hot shot." And you'll fail the master. You'll fail the people that you wanted to serve. You fail yourself, and without question, you will fail your legacy. I've seen so many guys who have been at the front of the line, and then when they get old and retire, and people are giving them the praise they think they should still deserve, they start to get really nasty, and they stop encouraging others, and they say, "Oh, stop it, people, stop it." This is how Paul put it in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, and I love this passage. I want you to pay attention to it. "This then is how you ought to regard us as servants of Christ, and as those entrusted with the mysteries God has revealed. Now it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. I care very little if I am judged by you or by any human court. Indeed, I do not even judge myself. My conscience is clear, but that doesn't make me innocent. It's the Lord who judges me. Therefore, judge nothing before the appointed time. Wait until the Lord comes. He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness, and will expose the motives of the heart. And at that time, each will receive their praise from God." That's what really matters. So you, in your life, can recognize that there is a reward in that passage. It comes from God, who does the evaluating, including the you straighten up the hidden things in your attitude and have frank conversations with the people who are around you, some who love you and some who may not love you, and ask them what they think of your attitudes, and maybe you need to adjust your manner, if not your attitudes, whatever it is. But always remember that according to Jesus, those who are seen as the first, many of them, many, not a few, many, will be last. But many who are last, that people don't know about necessarily and don't hold as important, they become the first. Well, there you go. That is a solid lesson for you to think about. I never did hear that lesson at any of the pastors' conferences that I went to. I may have been sleeping and somebody may have covered it, but I didn't hear it. And I doubt that they covered it often enough. But you can by demonstrating your own life to be the way that God designed it to be.